In this session, we're going to take a look at the software and hardware inventory feature that's part of the system health capabilities in EventSentry. So I'm here in the management console, and you can see here that the inventory package is installed and assigned globally by default. So if we go under Packages, System Health, Inventory, and click here, we have the software hardware inventory settings. And I'm just going to go through from the top to the bottom. So the main functionality of these features, of course, is the ability to inventory software that's installed. So any software that registers itself in the control panel under Programs and Features is going to be picked up by EventSentry and listed in the web reports. But you'll not only just get the inventory, but EventSentry can also detect when somebody installs or uninstalls software, which will be logged to the event log. So you can send off an email alert, for example, when somebody installs or uninstalls software. And the severity with which that kind of detection will log to the event log is with this setting here. So by default, it's actually information, and I had earlier changed this to warning. But let's take a look at what this looks like. So if I go to the web reports, go on the feature, we'll find most of that functionality on the bottom right here in those four icons here. I'm going to go at software current. That's going to show us the current inventory. And I'm just going to pick the machine that I'm working on right here, EventSentry, where we can see a nice overview of all the software that's installed on this machine. So we can see 32 versus 64-bit software. We can see all the publishers of which software is installed, the actual applications, versions, and so forth. And if we click on detailed, of course, then we can get a detailed view of all the software that's installed. And we can see down here, there's page 1, there's more than just 25. So I'm just going to increase this to 50 so I can fit everything on one page. And yeah, we can see here the publisher, the application, the version, and which directory it's installed. Keep in mind that's actually controlled by the software vendor that installs your software. So this is nothing that we can control. So if that's missing, then it's just because the software vendor has not registered that. The web reports will also do a version check in the background for select software. So obviously for our own software, for anything that's published by NETIKUS.NET, you'll see that for a lot of third-party software like browsers, we do this as well. And if we find that a software is out of date, it'll be marked here as red, for example. It'll show you what the latest version is, and it may also show you a URL where you can get the download to the latest version. We also have the end of life capability here. So if there's a particular software that you have running on your network that's end of life, then that will be marked here as well. But this is how easy it really is to see, what's actually installed on your machine. And it's also extremely easy then to go back here. I'm going to erase this screen and refresh this, and also compare, which computers do have specific software installed. So if we're looking at, for example, Notepad++, if I click that, then I immediately see, okay, this is actually installed on 2 computers. And if you switch, although with different versions, and if I click on the detail tab here, then I'll see the details, of course, but it will also show us which computers do not have that software installed. So if you want to make sure something is actually installed on all of your hosts, then this is really useful. Another thing we have, of course, is the history. So let's take a look at that. Prior to making this video, I actually updated a few items of software on that computer. And you can see that, all the changes only happened on this EventSentry computer. So if we click on detailed, we can see all the changes that happened here. So for example, we can see that and keep in mind that if I made all those changes in a fairly short amount of time, so most of them are actually grouped together here with the same timestamp. Normally, that would not be the case. But if we look at Notepad++, for example, we can see that version 8.53 was uninstalled and 8.56 was installed. Again, normally they would be in chronological order, but because everything happened fairly fast, sometimes those can be in a random order, basically. Then we can also see that we uninstalled, and let's take a look here at the columns. Let's include the 64-bit here. Yeah, so we can also see here that the SQL Server Compact 3.5 was uninstalled, and it was a 32-bit version, so 64-bit set to 0 here. It was then installed with the build 8080, so a newer build than this. So this was basically updated. And then we can also see that apparently the 64-bit version of that new for version 3.5, there's a newer version available now, but for that SQL Server Compact 3.5 was installed for 64-bit that was previously not installed. Okay, so you get full visibility as to what's happening on these machines. It's great for security reasons, of course, but also great for troubleshooting. So if something stops working, and maybe it's because somebody updated something or uninstalled something. So back in the management console, the next option here is monitor web browser extensions. So we actually monitor web browser extensions for all major browsers, which includes Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. So the new version of Edge that's Chromium based. And again, this is logged with the same severity when a change is detected, meaning a browser extension is installed, uninstalled, or updated. And again, we can go back here to browser extensions, and let's go to current and see all the browser extensions that are installed. So this is a test network, so there really is just one extension available that I installed, and I installed that. You can see which browser in Firefox. You can see which username this is associated with, whether it's enabled, the name of the extensions, along with the version, the publisher, and some details if they are available. And since I had just installed it, you can actually see that on the history as well. So if I click on details here, you can see that at 3:45 p.m. that extension was installed for this user. Next part is the hardware inventory. So with the hardware inventory, we are collecting basic hardware stats about a machine. So how many CPUs, what type of CPU, how much memory is installed, a list of hard drives, network cards, installed memory, and so forth. There's some limited change detection here as well. So if you turn off a computer, for example, and you upgrade the amount of memory, for example, then EventSentry will detect that and log that to the event log. But otherwise, it's mainly a feature that's useful for inventory capabilities. So we can see that here under hardware. So if we go down here, let's just restrict this to, let's just say to a particular group. Let's go with the servers group, makes this a little bit easier to digest. And yeah, here we can see, okay, so we have two 2019 servers, one 2022 server. We can see the EventSentry agent is being inventoried here as well. We can see that one server is a Dell server, two are Microsoft Corporation, so that's of course a Hyper-V client. We can see the two are virtual machines. One is a PowerEdge, so it gives us the actual model of that server if it's hardware based. In some cases, you can also see the actual chassis. So this will say, okay, two are virtual. This one is a rack mount server. How many cores, how many CPUs, which type of edition, and so forth. And of course, if you click on details, well, then we'll see all the details about these machines. So you can expand this. We can also see when it was installed. We can see other properties like UAC, manufacturer. We can see serial numbers if it's a hardware device, the version of the BIOS. So if you wanted to compare that with the latest version that's available, on the hardware manufacturer's website, you can see is the BIOS up to date. We can see the time zone, the processors, how many cores there are. We can see the physical memory. And for physical machines, of course, also the max capacity, the highest version of USB supported, the current uptime, the max uptime that the server has ever seen. So the longest, uptime for all these servers has been 56 days for the last one. We can see if TPM is enabled. We can see if it's pending a reboot. For example, if software patches, if an update was installed but the server was not rebooted, then it would say yes here. If it's a laptop, for example, we can see things like battery capacity and the battery health. Of course, the EventSentry agent version and the configuration revision of that agent. And whether BitLocker is installed or configured or not. And you can see this also a little bit better, more visually appealing if you go to Features, Host, and you select the server there. So I'm going to just go with that EventSentry server here again, since this is actually a physical server. So we have that same information here again, a little bit more actually. So for example, we can even see the power consumption here with 200 watts for that server. We can also see the memory that's installed, the actual DIMMs that are in that server, all the network cards, along with the identifier, the name, descriptive name, IP address, the speed with which this network card is connected to a switch, MAC address, and so forth. We can see all the disk controllers. We can see all the logical disks that are installed or physical disks. So these Dell disks are obviously all RAID drives. And we can actually see more details if you install the respective management software, OpenManage, for example. We can also see additional information. So EventSentry can actually pick up various things from your hardware servers, including like the fans, if the fans are okay, the temperature of the system board in Celsius, the remote access card, the status of all the power supplies, and we can even see the physical disk, the controller, configuration of the controller, all the logical disks here, and all the physical drives behind it, and what type of RAID level has been configured for these drives, along with the size, and whether their status is okay or not. So that's all available from the hardware inventory. Monitor Wi-Fi connection. Well, that's of course useful for hosts for computers that have Wi-Fi connections. And generally speaking, laptops. And what that gives you basically is the ability to see which Wi-Fi connections are these computers connected to. So if you have sensitive laptops in the field, you want to see, okay, which Wi-Fi networks are they connecting to, and also get alerts, for example, in the event log. Then you can enable this option. This option here detects whether an application registers itself in some of the common auto-run locations, for example, the run key in the registry. You can back up the master boot record and bootloader and store it in the database. So if there's ever a virus that overrides or deletes the MBR, then you can technically retrieve that from the web reports and manually rewrite that back onto the hard drive. You can also monitor any batteries that Windows registers, usually for laptops and for some UPSs that are connected, for example, with the USB cable. There you can also get alerts if the battery is below a certain percentage or if the runtime is below a certain number of minutes. So that will be possible for, again, both UPSs that are attached to the USB cable or for laptop batteries. And of course, down there, you essentially configure in which database all this information is written to. And lastly, you can ignore applications that only register GUID. So there's some applications out there that don't actually register a name, they just register GUID. In most cases, it's okay to ignore those because they're not very descriptive and kind of just pollute the software inventory. Yeah, so with this feature enabled, you pretty much have a complete inventory of all software, hardware, including web browser extensions of your entire network. So really, really helpful for security, but also just for regular, sysadmin tasks if you want to just stay on top of your network inventory.